If a player is born to be fundamental, and if a player can have their career based on the fundamentals, then why can't there be a player who is the opposite? Why can't there be a player whose career is built on flashiness and a playstyle that you've never seen before? Of course, I am talking about LaMelo Ball, the NBA equivalent of a kid who plays like he has his AirPods in, his slides on, wearing his backpack, and still beats you in a game of one-on-one. LaMelo has fallen in the wayside of the NBA, and it's understandable. Outside of being banished to Charlotte, he struggled to stay on the court, playing just 65 games once in his 5-year career. In the last 3 seasons, he hasn't played more than just 47 games. Coming off of another year that has been shortened by injury, this is going to be a crucial season not only for LaMelo Ball, but for the Charlotte Hornets. And I actually really like this roster that they have surrounded LaMelo with. Not in a way that they're going to win a ton of games, but in a way that LaMelo might actually be seeing some help. And very quietly, I actually think the Charlotte Hornets had one of the best NBA drafts. And the other critical thing to know about the Charlotte Hornets is that they are committed to LaMelo Ball, as his contract is guaranteed through the end of the 2029 season, so even if he continues to stay injured, he's not going anywhere. LaMelo Ball is without a doubt talented, but we all know his game is flawed. Injuries have been the concern for his entire career, but in the 1 year that he stayed healthy, he was an all-star. Over the last 3 seasons, all of which have been riddled by injuries, he's been averaging 24 points, 6 rebounds, and 8 assists per game. He's been the only shining light on a team that doesn't have much else to cheer for. And that's the thing with Ball. He is without a doubt one of the most talented offensive pieces in the NBA, and there are few players in the league that are an offensive engine like him. Ever since entering into the league, he's been one of the league's best playmakers. He has incredible vision both in half court and on the fast break. And I actually give some credit to their head coach Charles Lee. I think he does a great job in letting LaMelo play his flashy, kind of loose play style while still having somewhat of a free-flowing and somewhat of a reasonable offense with the Hornets. Now, last season, the Hornets did have the second worst offense in the NBA, but that is definitely far from LaMelo Ball's fault. With LaMelo on the court, that 29th ranked offense actually rises to around the 20th ranked offense in the league. Per 100 possessions, LaMelo makes them better by nearly 11 points on offense. Few players cause that drastic of a swing offensively. And while improvement like this is incredibly impressive, it's not sustainable, nor does it really lead to winning basketball. Last season, LaMelo Ball had a usage rate of 35.9%. Not only did this lead the league, but it would have been the 21st highest usage rate of all time in a single season. And currently, his career 30.2% usage rate is on pace for the 21st of all time, and it's only climbing. For an injury-prone player, this isn't exactly something that's repeatable. And one aspect of his game that has been hurt by this is his efficiency. So last year, Ball had a below-average true shooting percentage, and he shot a career worst 40% from the field and 34% from 3 on a career-high number of attempts. And I certainly believe that Ball is a better shooter than this. For his career, he's around an 84% free throw shooter, and last year he shot around 40% on wide open threes, which is the same mark as Devin Booker. He can put the ball in the hoop, but in his combination of difficult shots and the lack of a real second option for the majority of his career, it puts a strain not only on his body, but on his numbers. And none of this leads to winning basketball either. I mean, how can you win when your best player isn't even on the court? Of course, LaMelo's win shares are less than impressive, but if you look at his win shares per 48 minutes, which can better contextualize with injuries, Ball has been at a below league average win shares per 48 minutes, all except one time in his career. And if you look at players with high usage rates, they typically don't go very far. They either rarely make the playoffs or they don't make it very far in the playoffs. Playing a heliocentric style of basketball where all of your offense is coming from one player just isn't something that leads to a lot of repeated success. And with all of this being said, I don't want this to take away from LaMelo Ball's pure basketball ability. I don't think that there are a lot of point guards in the league who are actually better than LaMelo. I think it's just that LaMelo gets forgotten about when he hasn't been on the court nearly as often as other guys, and of course, he has to play in Charlotte. And blaming injuries solely on his usage rate, that's not exactly accurate either. But LaMelo needs help from the Hornets. His style of play, while flashy and while it's fun, it doesn't lead to wins, and it's going to only derail his career. I really think this could be the year that determines if LaMelo Ball is a star level player or a what if. I don't expect the Hornets to win a lot, I don't expect Ball's win shares to be immaculate, but he needs to play enough games to qualify for awards. He needs to hit that 65 game mark, and part of that responsibility goes on LaMelo. Availability is truly the best ability. And I do have hope in this. He had surgery on his wrist and ankle back in April, meaning he's had over half a year to recover and rehab. Over the summer, one thing Ball has focused on is building up his base and his lower strength. For somebody who struggled with lower body injuries in his career, lower body strength might just help prevent that. Charles Lee has praised his efforts on the defensive end and wants to see a continued improvement there, and that's fine, but the thing is, you can't expect a player to be super good on the defensive end. You can't expect them to be a great defensive playmaker if they're also running 36% of your offense by themselves. I do think that 36% usage rate, something that has been extremely high for the majority of his career, I think that's something that could actually be tailing off and dropping off in this upcoming season. Charlotte has a relatively guard-heavy roster this year, and while part of that could be as its insurance for a Ball injury, part of that can also actually help take the ball out of LaMelo's hands and just help drop that usage rate. I'm personally really high on Brandon Miller. I don't think he was as bad as I've heard people out to make him last year. In the 27 games he played last season, he saw an increase in his field goal attempts, assists, and usage rate. While he isn't an efficient player, Nick Smith Jr. is going to be just 21 years old. He saw a lot more games last year, albeit a lot of that was just because of the injuries the Hornets sustained. And over this offseason, the Hornets actually brought in quite a few players, and a lot of these guys can help out the Hornets from a playmaking or from a depth standpoint. He's not a guard, but Mason Plumlee has always been a good playmaker for a center. Pat Connaughton is more of a 2-guard, but he's still a good rotational piece. Colin Sexton is a huge pickup. He's a starting caliber point guard who last year averaged around 18 points and 4 assists per game on a 27% usage rate. Sexton is a guy who can come in and he can either play minutes when Ball is on the bench, or he can play and let LaMelo take a play off. And while they are rookies, I do think the Hornets actually had a pretty solid draft, and I think these guys can help out Ball a little bit this year and especially down the line. They weren't crazy playmakers in college, but Colin Knoepel was the 4th overall pick, and his teammate Zion James were both guards on a talented Duke squad. He could be kind of like Plumlee, but Ryan Kalkbrenner was a solid passing center. On top of that, he was one of the most efficient players in college, and he was also a pretty solid shot blocker. The Hornets are far from a perfect team, but they have given Ball some new teammates. Colin Sexton, like I said, I think he's going to take a little bit of pressure off of Ball at the guard position. Miles Bridges, Brandon Miller, and Colin Sexton, any one of those guys are capable of dropping 20 points on any given night. Having an injury-prone player be involved in 1/3 of all of your plays and be responsible for this much of your success, that is not something that is viable. Having the worst offense in the league without LaMelo Ball, without a player who is responsible for over 1/3 of your plays, that is just not something that is repeatable. That is not something that is going to lead to franchise success this year, next year, years from now. But some of the small steps that the Hornets have taken, it's not going to add to their win count, but I think it's stuff that can add to them just becoming a better team overall. It can add to them having a better future, and it can help keep LaMelo healthy, and it can help drop that usage rate. And of course, with all this being said, LaMelo needs to do his part as well. Now, I never want to blame a player for their injuries, but Ball needs to do what he can to prevent them from happening. The Hornets also want to see him establish himself as a leader on and off the court. That could be huge for the culture of the Hornets and giving the team a new identity. This season is also going to be really important in seeing the kind of player that Ball is and where he sits amongst the rest of the league. I think LaMelo Ball can actually be the #1 offensive option on a championship team, but that only works if he has a team that has good depth surrounding him. It only works if he has a good coach with him, and of course it requires him to have a good secondary option that is also a viable defender. Think someone like Anthony Davis, Victor Wembanyama, or like Jimmy Butler. However, I've also seen people call LaMelo Ball a #2 option, and I don't disagree with that at all. LaMelo Ball is going to be just 24 years old next season, and assuming he's healthy, he's going to really start to enter into his prime. And this is the season that we can determine the type of option he's capable of. I don't think the Hornets are going to be great, but I would love to see some on and off the court development. This is a pivotal year for Ball and the Hornets. They don't need to win, they don't need to compete, but they do need to stay relatively healthy. Ball needs to get to that point where he can play that 65 games and be eligible for awards. He needs to establish himself in the NBA. He needs to establish the kind of option he can be if he can carry a team or if he is best paired with another superstar. It would also mean a lot for the Hornets if he could develop that leadership both on and off the court. Charlotte really needs a defensive identity. They were like the second worst defense in the league, and a lot of these teams that lose a lot, it's hard for them to stop losing when they don't develop a winning culture, and that starts on the defensive side of the ball. But by developing a defensive identity, by spreading the ball out, by dropping LaMelo's usage rate, these are things that can all happen without the Hornets needing to win. These are things that could all happen with this current roster. By no means do I want or expect LaMelo Ball to change his unorthodox playstyle. I think he is clearly a star level player, and he has proven that yes, he does some things a little bit differently, but it works, it puts the ball in the basket, and it generates offense. The changes that I want to see is to create a more sustainable and growing basketball environment. That is going to start with, but it certainly doesn't end with, LaMelo Ball. If you like this video, you know what to do, but that is it for this one, and I will catch you all next time.